Yesterday morning, my son Ryan called, his voice shaking with panic. "Mom, why are all the cards declined? My mother-in-law and I couldn't even pay for lunch. People were laughing at us." And I felt a kind of satisfaction I never imagined I could feel toward my own child. But before you judge me, you need to know what happened the night before, when my daughter-in-law, Dana, decided to publicly humiliate me in my own home. I'm 68, a widow, and for years I've been nothing more than a personal ATM for my son and his wife. Every whim, every luxury, every unnecessary expense, taken straight from my savings. Yesterday, while I was serving coffee in my living room, Dana turned to her friends and said the words that shattered something inside me. "That old woman is only good for paying our bills." Ryan didn't defend me. He laughed, as if mocking his mother was the funniest thing in the world. I stood there, coffee pot in hand, watching them ridicule me. My hands trembled, not from sadness, but from a cold, sharp anger I had never felt before. In that moment, I finally saw the truth I'd been refusing to face. To them, I wasn't a mother. I wasn't family. I wasn't even human. I was a walking bank account. For 10 years, I rescued them financially. When Ryan lost his job, I paid his rent for 8 months, $800 a month from my pension while he barely looked for work. When Dana needed a new professional wardrobe, $3,000 went on my credit card. Their much-deserved Hawaii vacation? Another $5,000 gone. They never once invited me. I was good enough to fund it, never to join. "It's a romantic getaway, Mom, you understand, right?" Ryan would say. And like a fool, I always did. I paid. I stayed quiet. I let them live a life I financed while mine shrank around me. The final straw came 3 months ago when Dana announced she needed a new car. "The one we have is old, Georgia," she said, sweet as poison. "And if we're having kids soon, we need something safer." A $15,000 down payment, 2 years of my savings, gone in a blink. And I paid it, like always, for the good of the family. But last night, after hearing those cruel words, after seeing my son laugh at my pain, something inside me broke loose and stood up. I didn't sleep. Not from sadness, but from a burning clarity. At 3 a.m., I got out of bed, turned on my computer, and finally did what I should have done years ago. I canceled every card they had in my name. I canceled every single one of the 5 cards they treated as if they belonged to them. Then I closed the shared savings account, where I deposited money each month for so-called emergencies that were nothing more than fancy restaurant tabs and designer shopping sprees. I changed every banking password, shut off the automatic transfers, and removed their names from everything. By 6 a.m., it was done. I poured myself a cup of coffee and settled into my favorite armchair. For the first time in years, I felt peace. I knew the phone would ring soon, my son, humiliated and desperate, and I was finally ready. At 9:15, it happened. I was enjoying my second cup when I saw Ryan's name flash on the screen. I didn't answer right away. I let it ring, savoring a kind of strength I hadn't felt in decades. When I finally picked up, his voice was frantic. "Mom, why are all the cards declined?" I'm at the Crestview Grill with Dana's mother. We were celebrating her birthday. People are staring at us. The waiter's annoyed. I don't have enough cash to cover a $200 bill. What's going on? The irony was delicious. They'd chosen the most expensive restaurant in town, the one I had paid for countless times but was never invited to. Now they were sitting in the very place they used to impress others, unable to pay for a single meal. "Good morning, Ryan," I said, calm and steady. "The cards are canceled because I'm done financing your lifestyle." "What? Mom, are you serious? We're in public. Dana's mother is here. How am I supposed to explain that my own mother left me stranded? This is ridiculous." "What's ridiculous," I said, "was hearing you laugh last night when your wife said I was only good for paying your bills. What's ridiculous is realizing that for 10 years, I'd been treated like an ATM instead of your mother." Silence. I could hear the murmurs behind him, Dana, her mother, the waiter, diners watching the scene unfold. Mom, please. Not now. We'll talk later, just reactivate the cards. Just for today, I promise. No more promises, Ryan. For 10 years, I heard those same words. For 10 years, I rescued you. Yesterday, I finally understood, you don't respect me, you don't value me, and you certainly don't love me the way I loved you. That's not true. Of course we love you. Dana was joking. You know how she is. Oh, I know exactly how she is. And I know exactly how you are. That's why I made this decision. I could hear his breathing, heavy, humiliated. I imagined the scene, the gold card that once impressed everyone now declined, the whispers, the embarrassment settling in. Mom, please. We're just standing here. What do you want us to do? Wash dishes? Call the police? This is humiliating. Now you know how I felt for years, I replied. The difference is, you're 35 years old. You're capable of solving your own problems. Are you sick? Are you feeling all right? This isn't like you. You've never been this cruel. Cruel. That word hit me like a slap. Cruel, after years of sacrificing my life, my comfort, my retirement, after working until 65 to make sure they'd be secure, after spending Christmases alone while they used my money to travel. Cruel, I repeated, my voice colder than I ever knew it could be, was laughing at me yesterday. Cruel was treating me like I didn't exist unless she needed money. Cruel was making me feel like my only worth, as a mother and as a human being, was the balance in my bank account. Mom, Dana didn't mean it that way. Dana meant exactly what she said, and you agreed with her. You both showed me exactly where I stand in your lives. I heard the commotion behind him, Dana demanding answers, her mother's irritated comments, the waiter hovering with that polite patience they use when they know there's a problem at the table. Look, Mom, I understand you're upset, but this is not the way to handle it. We can sit down and talk like adults, just help me this one last time, and then we'll change things. Just this one more time. I let out a bitter laugh, the kind I didn't even recognize as my own. One more time? Do you know how many last times I've paid for over the past 10 years? But Mom. No, Ryan. Not this time. You're going to find another solution. You have jobs, you have friends, you have in-laws, figure it out. How am I supposed to explain to Dana's mother that my own mother left us stranded at a restaurant? How am I going to face people who know us? Everyone is going to be talking about this. And there it was, the naked truth. He wasn't worried about our relationship or how they had treated me. He cared about his public image, his reputation, what people would think, just like always. That's your problem now, I said. For years, I worried about your comfort, your happiness, your dignity. It's time I worry about mine. You can't do this. You're my mother. Exactly. I'm your mother, not your employee. Not your personal bank. Not your financial safety net. And as your mother, I should have taught you years ago how to stand on your own 2 feet. Silence again, longer this time. I could feel his panic through the phone. I could almost see the gears turning in his head as he tried to calculate who he could call to bail him out without completely losing face. Mom, please. Dana is crying. Her mother is asking what kind of family we are. The waiter has already asked us 3 times if we're okay. Please, have mercy. Mercy. That word stung. Where was their mercy when I sat up late at night doing math just to cover their bills and my own? Where was their compassion when I wore the same old coat year after year so I could give them money for luxuries? Mercy is earned over time, Ryan. And you lost mine yesterday. I hung up. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, not from sadness, but from adrenaline, from a power I hadn't felt in decades. For the first time in years, I put myself first. For the first time in years, I said no. For the next 30 minutes, the phone didn't stop ringing, Ryan again, then Dana, then a number I didn't recognize, which I assumed was Dana's mother. With every call I declined, I felt stronger, more certain I was doing the right thing. I poured another cup of coffee and sat on the patio, soaking in the silence I had missed for so long. But peace didn't last long. At 11 a.m., I heard Ryan's car pull into my driveway, the car I helped pay for, of course. 2 doors slammed, footsteps rushed to my front door, and then the pounding began. "Mom, open the door. We need to talk." Ryan's voice, desperate, but with an edge of anger. "I know you're in there. Your car's outside." I didn't move. I sat quietly on my back patio, hidden from view, watching birds flutter to the feeder I installed last year. Amazing how simple joys feel richer when you finally have peace to notice them. "Georgia." Now Dana's sharp voice. "We know you're inside. Stop acting like a child and come out and face us." Face them, as if I were the one who had done something wrong. As if I owed them an explanation after years of financial and emotional abuse. The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. The pounding grew harder, I could hear feet now, not just fists. My oak front door, the one my late husband installed with such care, being treated like the entrance of a cheap bar. "This is ridiculous," Dana yelled. "You made us look like beggars. Ryan's mother had to pay for lunch. A 70-year-old woman had to take cash out of her purse because her daughter-in-law is acting insane." Ah. So Dana's mother had rescued them. I pictured it clearly, Ryan sweating, scrambling for excuses, Dana spinning lies, and the older woman reluctantly covering the bill. The humiliation must have been exquisite. "Mom, please," Ryan's voice cracked. People were staring. Some even filmed us. "This is going to be all over social media." Of course it was. Their greatest fear wasn't the harm they'd done, it was losing face online. Not remorse. Not self-reflection. Reputation. The pounding stopped for a moment, and I heard them whispering, angry, frantic. Plotting the next tactic. I knew Dana well, she had a toolbox full of manipulation techniques, and Ryan had learned them well. "Georgia," Dana called out again, this time with a soft, sugar-coated tone. "I know you're upset, and you have every right to be. Maybe what I said yesterday sounded bad, but you know I didn't mean it. I was just joking with my friends. You know how women talk when we get together. Sometimes we say things without thinking," she said. It amazed me how quickly she could switch personalities. Just minutes earlier she was screaming and kicking my door, and now she was the sweet, misunderstood daughter-in-law who made a tiny slip of the tongue. "Mom," Ryan's voice softened too, adopting the same syrupy tone. "I understand we hurt you." Dana explained everything. "And you're right to feel upset. But canceling the cards doesn't fix anything, it just makes things harder for everyone." For everyone. Not for me, of course. For them, for their comfort, their lifestyle, their convenience. My emotional well-being still wasn't part of the equation. "Please, Mom. We can fix this. We can change. But I need you to reactivate the cards today. I have bills due. The car insurance is tomorrow. Dana has doctor appointments this week. We can't suddenly be left without money." Without money. As if it were their money. As if I were responsible for their insurance, their appointments, their responsibilities as full-grown adults. In that moment, everything became painfully clear. They genuinely didn't see a difference between my money and theirs. In their minds, my savings were a communal family fund, never the result of decades of hard work and sacrifice by a woman who had already lived her life and paid her dues. "Georgia, think about what you're doing," Dana said, shifting tactics again, her voice now soft with false concern. "What will people think if they find out you cut off your own son? What will they say at church? What will the family think?" Ah, there it was, her favorite tool, shame. My reputation, my church, my family, always used as emotional leverage. As if my worth depended on what others thought. As if my dignity meant less than the opinions of people who had no idea how they treated me behind closed doors. "Look, Mom," Ryan said, voice suddenly more serious, more adult. "I get that you want changes. Fine. We can talk about boundaries and how to handle the family finances better, but this isn't the way. This is emotional manipulation." Those two words hit harder than the pounding on my door. Emotional manipulation. Me? After years of their guilt-tripping, silent treatments, and emotional blackmail whenever I hesitated to hand over money? After they used my love as a weapon to drain my savings? The projection was so absurd, I almost laughed. The knocking resumed, slower now, less aggressive. They were realizing force wasn't working. I heard them step away, circling the house, trying to spot me through a window. "Georgia!" Dana yelled from the side of the house. "We saw your shadow. We know you're in there. Stop hiding like a coward." Coward. There she was, the real Dana. The one behind the mask. The woman who called me that old woman and turned my generosity into a punchline. The same woman who taught my son to treat me like a resource, not a mother. I stood, walked to the window where she was shouting, and pulled the curtain back just enough for her to see me. Our eyes met. Her face instantly shifted, rage to relief to that artificial smile she used like a tool. "There you are," she said, as if speaking to a naughty child. "Come on, open the door so we can talk like a family." I held her gaze for a long, still moment. Then, without a word, I slowly closed the curtain. Her shriek hit immediately, followed by pounding on the window. But this time I didn't flinch. I returned to my patio and sat down. The phone started ringing again, I muted it. For the first time in years, my home felt mine. They kept at it for another hour. The yelling, the threats, the guilt, the pleas, all of it slowly losing steam. I caught bits of frantic whispering as they tried to strategize. At one point, Dana suggested calling a locksmith to break in. Ryan reminded her that would be illegal, breaking and entering. Even in their desperation, they didn't dare risk real consequences. Finally, I heard the slam of car doors and the sound of their engine pulling away. But I knew them, knew Dana especially. She'd already be planning her next move, something more dramatic, more manipulative, more emotionally polished. I was right. At 3 p.m., the calls began again, this time from unfamiliar numbers. The first was from Dana's mother, her voice polite, but firm. "Georgia, honey, I think there's been a little misunderstanding." Dana's mother sounded so calm, so civilized. "Dana told me what happened, and I'm sure we can resolve this like adults." I hung up without a word. Next came my sister Elaine, all the way from another state, clearly fed a heavily edited version of the truth. "Georgia, I just spoke to Ryan. He's really worried. He said you left them stranded at a restaurant and then canceled all their cards out of nowhere. Are you all right? Are you sick?" "I'm perfectly fine, Elaine," I said. "Better than ever, actually." "Well, Ryan says you blindsided them." "That doesn't sound like you. You've always been so generous with your family." "Maybe that was the problem," I replied. "Maybe I was generous for far too long. But Georgia, they're your family. Dana says you're punishing them for an innocent joke. Surely you can just sit down and talk this out." An innocent joke. Amazing how quickly Dana had rewritten the story. What was public humiliation the night before was now just a joke I was too sensitive to handle. "Elaine," I asked quietly, "have you ever felt like an ATM for your kids?" "What?" "No." "Why would you ask that?" "Because that's exactly what I am to Ryan and Dana. And yesterday, I finally saw it clearly." "Georgia, you're overreacting. Parents help their kids. It's normal. Is it normal to pay your grown son's rent for years? To fund his vacations while you eat dinner alone? To be laughed at for being generous?" Silence. "Well, maybe they've taken advantage a little." But cutting them off like this feels drastic. You know what's drastic, Elaine? Working until you're 65 to provide a decent inheritance for your child, only to discover he's already spending it while you're still alive. When the call ended, I unplugged the house phone and switched my cell to airplane mode. I needed silence. I needed space to think about what came next. That evening, making dinner for myself for the first time in months, without a single request for money interrupting, I noticed something shocking. I didn't feel guilty. My entire life, I was trained to feel guilt the moment I didn't meet someone else's needs, especially family. But this time, the guilt just wasn't there. What I felt instead was something I had forgotten I could feel: clarity. It was like stepping out of a fog. Suddenly, the last 10 years played through my mind like a film. The pattern had always been the same. Ryan or Dana presented a temporary emergency. I resisted. They applied emotional pressure, just this once. You're our only hope. What will people think? I caved. They fixed the temporary issue. Weeks later, a new emergency appeared. No repayment. No acknowledgement. No gratitude. And certainly no invitation to enjoy the benefits of the money I gave. I paid for their vacations, never invited. Covered their fancy dinners, I ate alone. Paid medical bills, no one asked about my health. I went to my study and pulled out my financial files. Time to face the truth. I reviewed 5 years of bank statements. The number nearly knocked the breath from me. $86,000. $86,000 in 5 years, more than half of my pension. More than some people make in 2 years. But the money wasn't the worst part. What hurt most was realizing that in return for $86,000, I received ridicule, indifference, and the treatment of a burden instead of a blessing. Then I found something that made my hands shake with anger. They had been using one of my cards for premium streaming services, expensive gyms, magazine subscriptions, luxuries I never signed up for or used. Little monthly charges that quietly added up to hundreds a year. Money drained from my account for a lifestyle I didn't even share. That night, I took out my will. I had written it 5 years ago, still naive enough to believe I was securing a future for a loving, appreciative family. Ryan was listed as the sole beneficiary: my house, savings, investments, everything. Looking at it now, I saw it with new eyes. Why leave everything to someone who had already burned through more than half of it while I was still alive? Why reward a person who treated me like a debit card instead of a mother? Tomorrow, I would call my attorney. Time to make serious changes. If Ryan insisted on treating me like a bank, then he could settle for interest, not the principal. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in years, not worrying about anyone else's bills. I woke up with a kind of energy I hadn't felt in a decade. It was Friday. And for once, I had plans that didn't involve saving anyone but myself. First on the list, call my lawyer. Then I planned to go to the bank to make a few more changes, and maybe, just maybe, buy myself something nice with the money I usually poured into someone else's whims. I plugged the house phone back in while making breakfast. As expected, 14 messages waited on the answering machine. I listened while sipping my coffee, and with each message, I became more certain I had done the right thing. Message 1, Dana, tearful and breathy. Georgia, it's Dana. I know you're upset, but please think about what you're doing. Ryan didn't sleep at all last night. He's so worried about you. He says he's never seen you like this. Please call us. Message 2, Ryan, sounding frantic. Mom, call me. I went to the bank this morning and they told me you closed the account where you deposited money for our emergencies. Why would you do that? That account was for both of us. He still called my money ours. That account was never for both of us. It was mine, money I set aside for their so-called emergencies that somehow always ended up being vacations, designer clothes, or nights out. Message 3, Elaine again. Georgia, Ryan called me. He says you closed a savings account too. Are you sure you know what you're doing? Don't you think you're being a little extreme? The messages all repeated the same tactics: fake concern, questioning my mental health, and advice disguised as worry. But message 11 made me pause. A number I didn't recognize, but the voice was familiar. Mrs. Whitlock, this is Oscar, Dana's cousin's husband. Look, I know we haven't talked much, but Dana asked me to call. She's really worried because she says you're acting strangely. As a man, I think women sometimes make things more complicated than they need to be. Why don't you just forgive and forget? Family is the most important thing. Family is the most important thing. Convenient motto, when the goal is to keep the same comfortable arrangement that benefits them. I wondered if Oscar would be so quick to forgive and forget if someone mocked him in front of his family while draining his bank account. At 9 o'clock sharp, I called the law firm where I'd made my will. The secretary said Mr. Coleman had a cancellation and could see me at 2 o'clock that afternoon. Perfect. Then I called the bank and requested a meeting with the manager to review all my accounts and add extra security. I wanted to make absolutely certain Ryan had zero access to anything related to my finances. As I got ready to leave, the doorbell rang. For a moment, my heart jumped, thinking it might be Ryan and Dana again. But when I checked the peephole, it was my neighbor, Lucy. Lucy, 62, widowed 2 years ago. We'd chatted over the fence occasionally, but she had never come to my door before. Good morning, Georgia, she said warmly. I hope I'm not intruding, but I heard a lot of shouting yesterday and wanted to check on you. I invited her in and poured her a cup of coffee. It felt refreshing to have someone in my home who wasn't here to take, guilt trip, or manipulate me. Are you all right? She asked. I saw your son and his wife here for hours yesterday, shouting, pounding on the door. I was about to call the police. I told her the story, not every intimate detail, but enough for her to understand. She listened quietly, nodding here and there with genuine concern. Georgia, she said when I finished, I need to be honest. For years, I've watched how they treat you when they visit. I've seen them pull up in new cars, wearing expensive clothes, glued to the latest phones. And meanwhile, you're still driving the same car from 10 years ago and shopping at the discount stores. Her words hit hard, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. She had seen what I refused to admit. But what struck me most, she continued, is that I've never once seen them do anything for you. I've never seen them bring groceries, fix something around your house, or visit without needing something. Is it that obvious? I asked, feeling shame and relief mix in my chest. To anyone outside the bubble, yes, she said gently. But I understand why you didn't see it. When you're a mother, you always want to believe the best about your children. Lucy stayed for nearly an hour. It was the most honest, freeing conversation I'd had in months. She shared her own stories of adult children who treated her like a safety net and how she learned to set boundaries after her husband died. You know what helped me the most, she said before leaving. Realizing that being a good mother doesn't mean being a martyr. You can love your children without sacrificing your dignity for them. Her words echoed in my mind all the way to the bank. In the manager's office, we reviewed all my accounts and added new security protections. I changed every password, enabled two-factor authentication, and ensured that only I had access to my financial information. Mrs. Whitlock, the manager said as he finalized the changes, may I ask what prompted these updates? Any security concerns? Let's just say I realized the greatest financial risk to my future lives within my own family, I said. He nodded knowingly. More common than you'd think. Older adults are often taken advantage of by relatives. You did the right thing. After the bank, I treated myself to lunch at a small, cozy restaurant I had always wanted to try but never allowed myself to enjoy. I ordered the most expensive entree on the menu, a glass of wine, and dessert. The bill came to $45, less than what Ryan and Dana spent on a single round of drinks on their nights out. As I enjoyed my meal, a realization washed over me. I couldn't remember the last time I tasted food without feeling guilty, anxious, or calculating how much I might need to set aside for Ryan's next emergency. For the first time in years, I ate with a full appetite and peace. My appointment with Mr. Coleman, my lawyer, was surprisingly validating. When I explained the situation and my intentions, he didn't look shocked at all. In fact, he told me stories like mine had become increasingly common. "Mrs. Whitlock," he said, reviewing my will, "we drafted this 5 years ago. You left everything to your son. Are you sure you want to make major changes?" "Absolutely," I said. "In those 5 years, I've seen who my son really is. He didn't appreciate my generosity, and he has already spent half of his inheritance while I'm still alive." His eyebrows rose slightly as I shared the $86,000 I had documented, not even counting the earlier years when I didn't track things as closely. "I understand," he said. "How would you like to restructure your estate?" "I want it divided. Part to charities that truly help people who need it, not entitled adults. Part to my sister, Elaine, who has always stood on her own feet and never asked for anything. And for Ryan," I paused, choosing the words carefully. "He'll still receive something, not out of spite, but it will be small enough that he'll have to work. And only if he proves 1 full year of financial independence." The lawyer smiled. "A reasonable and fully legal condition. You're encouraging responsibility rather than enabling dependency." I walked out of that office feeling lighter than I had in years. For once, my decisions were based on my values, not guilt or fear. When I arrived home, an unfamiliar car sat in my driveway. A well-dressed older woman stood waiting on my porch. It was Dana's mother, Claudia. "Georgia," she said with a tight smile, "good, you're home. We need to have a woman-to-woman talk." I let her inside, more out of curiosity than politeness. I wanted to hear the version of events she'd been fed. "Look, dear," Claudia began once we sat down, "I know there was a little misunderstanding yesterday. Dana told me everything, and frankly, I think you're blowing things out of proportion." "Exaggerating?" I asked. "Well, yes. Dana says she made a comment that you misunderstood, and now you've taken drastic measures. Canceling your own son's credit cards? Isn't that a bit extreme for a harmless joke between women?" A harmless joke between women. Amazing how quickly the story evolved, from public humiliation to a joke, and now apparently my fault for lacking a sense of humor. "Claudia," I said calmly, "do you give your daughter unlimited credit cards?" "No." "Do you pay your adult daughter's rent?" "No, but..." "Do you fund her vacations while you stay home alone?" Claudia shifted uncomfortably. "Every family handles finances differently." "Exactly. And I've decided to handle mine differently from now on." "But think about Dana and Ryan," she insisted. "They're young. They're building a future. They need support." "They're 35 and 32, I replied. At that age, I had raised a child, worked for years, and saved for my own retirement, with zero help from my parents. "Well, times were different," she muttered. "Yes, they were," I agreed. "Now there are more opportunities, better education, loans, careers. There's no reason 2 educated adults can't support themselves." Claudia tried a new angle. "Dana is devastated. She cried all night. She sees you as a second mother and doesn't understand why you're suddenly pushing her away. A second mother who's only useful for paying their bills, according to her own words." That was a joke. Women vent about their mothers-in-law. It's normal. Complaining in private is one thing, Claudia. Mocking someone publicly is another. For the next half hour, she cycled through every manipulative tactic in the book. Guilt, think of how your son feels. Fear, you'll end up alone. Shame, people are already talking. What will people think? Claudia even hinted that Dana knew people in social services. And when none of her guilt trips worked, she finally dropped the act. "Georgia, I'll be honest. Dana and Ryan are considering legal action. There are ways to declare someone mentally unfit when they make irrational financial decisions." There it was, the truth beneath the sugar-coated manipulation. If I didn't hand my money back over willingly, they would try to take control of it by force. I stood up. Claudia, before you go down that road, you may want to speak with a qualified attorney. I just came from mine, and he made it very clear, protecting yourself from financial abuse isn't a sign of incompetence, it's a sign that your mind is sharp. Her face strained. She realized she had gone too far, too fast. I didn't mean. Yes, you did, I said calmly. And now that I understand your real intentions, this conversation is over. I walked her to the door. Georgia, I hope you reconsider. A family war helps no one. There is no war, Claudia. There is simply a woman who finally knows her own worth. After she left, I sat in my living room and let her words sink in. They weren't done. They were willing to manipulate, intimidate, and even legally challenge my right to control my own money. That evening, I called Mr. Coleman and told him everything. He reassured me, declaring someone mentally incompetent requires medical proof and a lengthy legal process. Managing my finances responsibly only proved my stability. Still, he advised me to document everything, every threat, every conversation, and to get a professional mental health evaluation as protection. That night, I wasn't afraid because I doubted myself. I was afraid because I finally understood how far they were willing to go to reclaim the money I had taken back. But underneath that fear was something stronger. Determination. Claudia's threat didn't weaken me, it lit a fire in me. The next morning, I followed my lawyer's advice. I went to a private clinic for a full mental evaluation. After 2 hours of testing, the doctor looked up with a warm, confident smile. Mrs. Whitlock, you are exceptionally clear-minded. Recognizing financial abuse, setting boundaries, and protecting your assets are signs of a healthy, capable adult. Frankly, you are thinking more rationally now than when you allowed the abuse. She handed me the signed, sealed report. Proof of my competency, my legal armor. When I returned home, my neighbor Lucy was in her garden. She walked over, concerned. Georgia, an older woman came by asking strange questions about you. Wanted to know if you'd been acting oddly. I told her you seem happier than you've been in years. I told Lucy about Claudia's visit, the threats, everything. Lucy was furious. Trying to label you incompetent because you stopped funding their lifestyle? That's disgusting. What hurts most, I admitted, is that they feel entitled to my money. They don't see it as my life savings. They see it as their inheritance, paid early. Lucy smiled softly. You know what you need? Joy. When was the last time you did something just for you? She was right. I had spent so many years shrinking myself to keep the peace that I had forgotten what joy even looked like. There's a 5-day cruise leaving Wednesday, she said. My sister just canceled. Come with me. My heart lifted. When had I last traveled for pleasure? Slept in a hotel bed? Ordered a meal without calculating the cost? Breathed without waiting for Ryan's next emergency? I'd love to, I said. And I meant it. We booked it that afternoon, $1,500 each, all-inclusive. A fraction of what I'd spent on Ryan and Dana's last trip, only this time, it would be for me. On Sunday morning, while I was deciding what to pack, the doorbell rang. It was Ryan. Alone. And he looked broken. He stood at my door with deep, exhausted circles under his eyes, his clothes wrinkled, his face desperate. Mom, he said, his voice cracked. Please, can we talk? Just us. No Dana. No yelling. Just you and me. I let him in, but I kept my heart guarded. I had finally learned to recognize emotional manipulation when I saw it. Mom, I'm sinking, he began. The car insurance is due Monday, and I don't have the money. If I can't renew it, I can't legally drive. And without a car, I'll lose my job. How much is it? I asked. $250. And how much did you earn last month? $3,500, but. But what, Ryan? We have bills, rent, food, utilities. And? I pressed. What else do you spend money on? He hesitated. Mom, life is expensive. Life is expensive when you're living a lifestyle you cannot afford, I said. Tell me the truth, how much did you spend eating out last month? I don't know, maybe. And streaming subscriptions? Gym memberships? Delivery apps? That's different, Mom. Those are basic necessities. Streaming is a necessity? In today's world, you can't live like a hermit. And there it was, the core of the issue. He believed luxury was a right, and real responsibility belonged to someone else. To me. Ryan, you're 35. You're educated. You have a job. Why can't you pay a $250 bill? Because there's nothing left after everything else. Then cut everything else. It's not that simple. You can't just slash your life like that. Why not? He grew frustrated. Because we have a life to maintain. A life you can't afford, I replied. You're upset because for the first time I'm not funding it. He looked away. He knew it was true. Ryan, I want an honest answer. In the past 10 years, have you ever created a budget and lived within your salary? Silence. Have you ever considered moving to a cheaper apartment? More silence. Have you ever cut expenses so you wouldn't need my money? Mom, that's unfair. Unfair? It's unfair to ask a 35-year-old man if he's ever tried to live within his means. You don't understand the pressure we're under. Dana has expectations. Her friends live a certain way. We can't look poor. And when did it matter how I felt? My pressure? My expectations? For the first time, he had no answer. I watched the realization hit him, hard. Mom, he whispered. I didn't know you felt burdened. No? You never wondered how I paid for your lifestyle while I ate beans and rice? You never noticed I wore the same coat for 8 winters, but somehow always had money for your emergencies? Tears streamed down his face. I thought you wanted to help. I thought that was how you showed love. It was, Ryan. But you turned my love into obligation. My generosity into expectation. And eventually, my sacrifice into a joke. Mom, what Dana said was the last straw. But the load had been piling up for years. He cried quietly, truly cried, perhaps for the first time in his adult life. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer, humbled. What can I do to fix this? You can start by paying your own car insurance. He stayed for nearly an hour after that, sitting quietly in my living room, processing, maybe growing for the first time in years. We didn't say much more that afternoon, but I saw something shift in his eyes. For the first time in years, Ryan wasn't just scrambling for a solution, he was actually thinking. Truly reflecting. When he finally stood to leave, he said quietly, Mom, I'll find a way to pay the insurance. And, we're going to sit down and take a hard look at our spending. I wasn't ready to trust those words, but it was the first sign of real adulthood I'd seen in him in a long time. On Monday morning, while I was folding clothes for my cruise that Wednesday, the phone rang. It was Dana, only this time, her voice was calm, almost gentle. Georgia. I know things have been tense. Could we meet for coffee? No Ryan, no drama. Just us? Curiosity got the better of me, so I agreed. We met at a small cafe by the mall. Dana arrived without designer labels, without the flashy jewelry she usually wore. She looked tired, but also humbled. Georgia, she began after we ordered, I need to apologize for what I said last week. It was cruel, disrespectful, and completely out of line. I didn't let her off easily. What changed your mind? She exhaled. Honestly? The restaurant incident was humiliating. But that wasn't all. These last few days, we've had to face our finances without your safety net, and it terrified me. What terrified you? I asked. That we have no idea how to live within our means, she admitted. We've been living like people with money, because you made up the difference. It was the first time I'd heard Dana speak with genuine honesty about money. Yesterday, Ryan and I sat down and made a real budget using only our income, no outside help. Do you know what we discovered? What? We're spending almost double what we earn. Not slightly over, double. And you covered the gap every time. And now? I asked. We have to make drastic changes. Our apartment is $1,200 a month. Based on our salaries, we should be paying $800 at most. We're going to have to move. She swallowed hard. Ryan resisted. But once he saw the numbers on paper, he realized we don't have a choice. We're canceling memberships, subscriptions, and we have to change how we socialize completely. She paused, then looked at me with surprising vulnerability. Georgia, I need to ask you something, and please be honest. When did you start resenting our financial dependence? The question caught me off guard. It wasn't one moment, I said slowly. It built over time. But it became real resentment when you stopped asking for help and simply expected it. When was that? She asked. When you started using the additional cards as if my money belonged to you. When my savings stopped being my future and became your automatic emergency fund. Dana's cheeks burned with shame. She nodded. You're right. At some point, we stopped seeing you as a person who was helping us, and started seeing you as a resource. Exactly. She hesitated, then asked softly, is there any way we can rebuild our relationship? I'll be honest, I said. The relationship we had before is gone. It was built on a dynamic that was never healthy. If we're going to build something new, it needs to be on entirely different terms. What kind of terms? Respect. Your financial independence. And a relationship where my value isn't tied to what I pay for. Dana sat with that for a long moment. So, does that mean you'll never help us again? It means that if, in the future, you face a true emergency, after you've proven you can live within your means, I would consider helping. But it would be help, not a lifestyle. How long would we have to prove it? She asked. It's not a time test, Dana, I said gently. It's a lifestyle change. If you can stick to a real budget, live within your means, and build your own emergency savings, that's when you'll show true financial maturity. And as for luxury vacations or fancy restaurants, those will have to be things you earn yourselves, just like most adults do. Dana looked overwhelmed, almost lost. Georgia. I'm not sure we even know how to live like that. Then it's time to learn. You're educated, you're capable, and you have opportunities. What you've lacked isn't ability, it's motivation to stand on your own. And if we fail, she asked quietly. Then you'll fail the right way, as responsible adults learning from your own mistakes. But at least it will be your life, not a life funded by someone else's sacrifice. We finished our coffees in thoughtful silence. As we stood to leave, Dana turned to me. Georgia. I know this doesn't undo the past, but I realized something important this week. What's that? That being an adult isn't about turning a certain age. It's about taking responsibility. You were the only one carrying the real responsibilities while we pretended to be grown-ups. It was the most honest, mature thing I had ever heard her say. That night, while packing for my cruise, I felt a peace I hadn't felt in years. I hadn't lost a family, I had walked away from a toxic pattern that was destroying all of us. If Ryan and Dana truly wanted change, it would have to show in actions, not apologies. On Tuesday, Ryan texted. Mom, I took out a personal loan to pay the car insurance. Also found a cheaper apartment. We move next month. I wanted you to know. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A real step toward the independence they desperately needed. That night, I slept soundly, knowing the next day marked the beginning of my first real adventure in decades, just for me. The cruise was a revelation. 5 days of waking up when I wanted, eating what I loved, and doing things simply because they made me happy. Lucy was the perfect travel companion, fun, independent, and blissfully free of family drama. On the ship, I met other women my age with stories just like mine. At dinner, one woman, Elaine, shared how her 3 adult children bled her retirement dry before she finally said enough. Another, Isabel, discovered her son had been gambling online with her credit card. What shocked me most, Isabel said as we watched the sunset from the deck, was realizing I wasn't alone. I thought it was just my family. Turns out, there's a whole generation of parents who don't know how to say no to their adult kids. When I arrived home Sunday, I felt renewed. 5 days with no money requests, no guilt, no pressure to fix anyone's chaos. I remembered who I was before I became the family's bank. There were a few messages waiting for me, but not one was a plea for money. Ryan had called twice just to make sure I got home safely. Dana's message simply said, "I hope you loved your cruise. We'd love to hear about it when you're ready." On Monday, Lucy came by with coffee and pastries, eager for every detail. As we were chatting outside, Ryan pulled into my driveway, but instead of rushing to the door, he sat in his car for several minutes. When he finally rang the bell, he looked nervous, but different, lighter, older somehow. "Mom," he began, "I know you just got back, but could we talk?" I let him in. Lucy slipped away to give us privacy. "Mom, I want to share what we've been doing," he said. We moved into a smaller apartment, $400 less a month. It was hard at first. Smaller place, not as nice of a neighborhood. But after a few days, I realized something. "What's that?" I asked. "That I can sleep at night knowing we're paying for our own life. I'm not waking up panicked about how we'll afford next month. It feels stable." It was the first time I had ever heard Ryan describe financial anxiety from his side. I had never considered he might be carrying the stress of a lifestyle that wasn't sustainable. "We canceled the fancy gym and joined a basic one for a fraction of the cost," he continued. "And Dana picked up a weekend job, her idea. She wants to contribute, not just manage money that isn't ours." I was genuinely surprised. "Mom, I also want to apologize. Not just for 2 weeks ago, for all of it. I treated you like an ATM, not a mother." "What made you realize that?" I asked. "When we built our first real budget, I saw how much life actually costs. My whole adult life, I lived beyond my means because you covered the gap." He looked me straight in the eye. "These last few days are the first time in years I've felt like an adult. Making my own decisions, fixing my own problems, facing consequences that are mine." "And how does that feel?" I asked softly. "Terrifying," he admitted. "But also, freeing." I didn't realize how heavy it felt pretending to be independent while secretly leaning on you to survive. The weight of knowing I was living a financial lie. The weight of realizing my lifestyle existed because I was taking advantage of my mother's kindness. His words hit me straight in the heart. For years, I thought I was the only one hurting in that dynamic. But Ryan had been carrying guilt and anxiety of his own. "Mom, I know I don't deserve to ask you for anything right now," he said quietly. "But, do you think we could ever have a normal relationship again? One where I visit you because I love you, not because I need something?" That question moved me deeply because, for the first time, he understood the difference. "Ryan, that kind of relationship can begin today, if you truly want it. I have always wanted a son who comes to see me because he cares about me, not because I'm useful. So, would you like it if Dana and I came for Sunday lunch? We'll bring the food, we'll cook, and we'll just be together." "I would love that," I said, and I meant it. After he left, I sat in my living room, processing what had changed in just 2 weeks. Yes, I had stepped down from being my family's financial savior, but in return, I had gained something far more precious, my self-respect and the chance at a real relationship with my son. That night, I called Mr. Coleman to discuss updating my will again. After talking with Ryan, I wanted a different approach. Instead of punishing him forever, I wanted to create something that rewarded maturity and growth. Miss Whitlock, my lawyer said, you're talking about a tiered will based on behavior. Exactly. If Ryan shows true financial independence for 2 full years, he receives a larger portion. If he maintains it for 5 years, he earns another increase. But if he slips back into old habits, everything reverts to the original plan. It's wise, he said. It rewards long-term personal development. After I hung up, it hit me, this was the first time in years I was planning my future with hope, not fear. Hope that my son had genuinely learned. Hope that our relationship might heal. Hope that the rest of my life would be lived with dignity, peace, and respect. I stepped out onto my patio and looked up at the stars. In the distance, I heard the soft sound of the fountain I had installed last year, a small luxury I once questioned whether I deserved. For decades, I never thought twice about spending money on others, yet I hesitated to spend on myself. Now, I finally knew the truth. I deserved to treat myself with the same generosity I had given everyone else. It took me 68 years to learn that lesson, but I learned it. And I will never forget it again. If this story touched you, you can support me with a super thanks so I can continue writing more stories like this. Thank you in advance. Tell me, what would you do in this woman's shoes? I would truly love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And let me know where you heard this story. If you'd like more true life stories like this, be sure to like the video and subscribe. There are many more waiting for you. Big hugs, and see you in the next one.